I'll never forget that Saturday afternoon, sunny, perfect for a barbecue, and I had no idea that my entire life was about to flip upside down. My wife, Kate, and I were hanging out with the usual crowd, 3 other couples we'd gotten close to since moving into the condo complex a few months back. Every weekend, we all met up in the common area, grilling, drinking, and talking about whatever. It was a good setup, honestly, until I started noticing things that didn't sit right. So, picture this. Guys on one side of the grill talking sports, work, typical stuff, and then the women on the other chatting and laughing among themselves. This was the routine every weekend, and at first I thought everything was cool, but after a while I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, especially with the way the women interacted. The guys and I were pretty laid back. It was just nice to relax. But the women, especially my wife Kate, seemed different, like they were holding on to some private joke that the guys weren't part of. It started subtly. I'd catch Kate and the other wives glancing at each other, whispering, and then suddenly bursting into laughter. Nothing unusual, right? But each time it felt like we, the husbands, were the punchline of a joke we didn't know about. The other guys didn't seem to notice or maybe didn't care. But for me, every laugh started feeling more personal, like they knew something I didn't. Then came the jokes. They'd start teasing us, slipping in these little comments that seemed harmless at first. They'd joke about how Raymond's wife, Jill, spent a lot of time at the supermarket. At first, it seemed like regular small talk, but it got weirdly suggestive, talking about her getting friendly with the butcher. It was just barely disguised as humor, but it felt off. Jill herself was laughing right along, and Raymond, oblivious, just rolled his eyes. Then the attention shifted to Cecil. Marcy, his wife, worked in an office, and suddenly the wives were talking about her spending long lunches with her handsome Italian boss. Cecil looked uncomfortable, but the women were relentless, laughing and feeding off each other. By this point, I'm feeling more aware, more suspicious. I wanted to chalk it up to the wives just having a few too many drinks and getting rowdy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't just random jokes. Kate was acting strange, too. She'd always been social, but here with her friends, she was different, almost like she was enjoying making me uncomfortable. Then it hit me. I was the next target. The women started making snide comments about the guys at the gym. Kate, for example, talking about how impressive some of them were in ways that went well beyond working out. Kate didn't look at me when she joined in, and when I glanced her way, she just ignored me and kept laughing with her friends. At that moment, the lightheartedness of the evening soured for me. It wasn't just a one-off. There was a pattern here. Each weekend, the women were joking more openly, and the guys were being quietly humiliated in front of each other. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I knew I didn't like it. As the evening wore on, we all sat around, finishing off the food and drinks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The wives were in their own world, and I felt more isolated than ever. And that's when I made up my mind. I was going to get to the bottom of whatever was going on. I didn't know exactly what I'd find, but the way Kate and the other wives were behaving, it felt like there was more to the story than just a few innocent jokes. After that barbecue, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. It was like once I noticed something was wrong, I couldn't unsee it. I kept catching more signs, little things here and there during the week. Kate seemed distant, distracted even. She wasn't cold, exactly, but it was like she had this other life going on in her mind. We'd sit down for dinner and I'd ask her about her day, expecting the usual chat. Instead, she'd keep her answers short, like she had nothing to say to me. It was bizarre. She'd always been so talkative. Then came the jokes. That was the biggest change. For years, we'd been each other's safe place, someone you could laugh with about anything, but now her humor was sharper, biting. I started noticing that her jokes had more to do with what she didn't like about me. Small jabs about things she thought I didn't do well, or comments about the kind of men who work out more than I do. It wasn't in her nature to be mean, so this new side of her really threw me off. I started to feel paranoid, like I was being mocked in my own home, even if no one else was there to witness it. I also noticed her going out more often. Kate had always been social, but this was different. She'd Started going to lunch with the girls at least twice a week, and sometimes it stretched into an all-day affair. When I'd ask her about it, she just brushed me off with some vague excuse, claiming they lost track of time or ended up at someone's house for coffee. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but after those barbecues and the way the wives laughed at the men, I wasn't sure anymore. Were these lunches just another layer of the joke? The kicker was when I found myself alone one Saturday afternoon. Kate had said she'd be out with Jill and Marcy, so I figured I'd use the time to catch up on a project I had been putting off around the house. At around 3, I decided to get a coffee at the cafe down the road. On my way there, I thought I saw her car parked across from the mall. Now, Kate hadn't mentioned going to the mall, and this cafe was pretty close by, so curiosity got the best of me. I walked over to make sure it was her car, and sure enough, it was hers. No mistake. I was tempted to wait around, but something held me back. I didn't want to look crazy, but once I started paying attention, things kept piling up. The following week, she left her phone on the kitchen counter, which she never did. She was always careful about her phone, carrying it everywhere with her, so naturally I took a peek. There was nothing unusual in the texts, but that wasn't what caught my eye. It was the call log. There was a number saved with no name, just initials, BG. I didn't recognize it. I knew everyone in Kate's circle, and there wasn't a BG anywhere in that list. It was strange. She had called this number several times, almost daily, and usually right before she went out with the girls. I knew I was pushing boundaries by looking, but at that point, I needed answers more than I needed to respect her privacy. Later that week, I tried bringing it up. I casually asked if she was going anywhere new with her friends, maybe somewhere I hadn't heard about yet. She shot me a strange look and told me she didn't want to bore me with girly stuff. It felt rehearsed, like she'd already thought about what she'd say if I asked. That's when I knew it wasn't just paranoia or me overthinking things. Something was definitely going on, and I was done sitting back and wondering. I needed to know the truth about what she was doing with her time. I decided it was time to dig deeper, but I had to be smart about it. If there was something to find, I couldn't just stumble on it by chance. I had to make a plan. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kate was hiding something big, so I decided it was time to stop wondering and start getting answers. I wasn't going to accuse her outright or let her know what I was up to. I wanted the truth clear as day, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes. That's when I came up with an idea to set a trap, a way to confirm what I suspected without her even realizing I was onto her. The opportunity came one weekday morning. Kate had already left for one of her lunches, so I knew I had a little time to work with. I took an old voice-activated recorder I had lying around and slipped over to Emmy's house, the spot where the wives always seemed to gather. Emmy was Kate's closest friend in the group, and I figured if they were up to something, Emmy's place would be where a lot of the planning happened. I knew it was a risk, but I was running out of options. So I tucked the recorder behind a stack of coffee cups on the counter, praying that it would catch something useful. The first day I picked up the recorder, my heart was racing. I listened to hours of ordinary conversations about groceries, home projects, kids, even recipes. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I wasn't giving up. I was ready to do whatever it took to get the truth. Finally, on the third day, things got interesting. I hit play, and for the first 30 minutes, it was the usual small talk. Then, almost like they'd been waiting for a private moment, the conversation shifted. I heard Emmy mention finishing quickly because she couldn't keep Tom waiting for too long. Another woman, I couldn't tell who, said she was jealous, and then Kate chimed in saying she wished she could be with someone like a horse. They all burst out laughing, and I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. My wife was talking about being with another man so casually, like it was just part of their routine. The details they shared were explicit. I learned way more than I ever wanted to know. Jill started asking questions, wanting specifics, and the other women just laughed like this was all one big joke. They weren't shy about who they were with or what they were doing. Kate even started bragging about how she met her lover, a guy named Bob, who was apparently perfect for some kind of twisted escapade she had in mind. I could barely believe what I was hearing. After that, I couldn't focus on anything else. I was shaking, furious, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I rushed into this, I just looked like the fool they already thought I was. I spent the rest of the night pacing around, replaying the recording over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood something, but it was all there, plain as day. The next day, I decided to double down. This time, I followed Kate when she left the house. She said she was meeting Jill at the mall, but I had a feeling that was just a cover. I stayed a few cars behind her, careful not to get too close. Sure enough, she parked, checked her purse, and pulled out a red flip phone I'd never seen before. Her usual phone was silver. I watched her dial, then saw her scan the parking lot as if she were checking for someone. She turned and walked into the mall, glancing back every so often to see if anyone was watching. I waited, then saw a blue Ford Explorer pull up near the loading dock. Bob got out, waved to her, and she hopped into the SUV without a second thought. They drove off, and I didn't bother following them. I knew exactly where they were going, the Rainbow Motel. I just parked nearby, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd wanted proof, and now I had it. Part of me didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying what I'd just seen. That night, Kate came home acting like nothing was wrong. She even cooked dinner just like usual and asked how my day was. I forced myself to play along, nodding and giving short answers, but inside I was done. I knew what I had to do next, and it was only a matter of time before I'd make sure she and everyone else knew exactly how I felt about being humiliated. I remember the day like it just happened. Saturday afternoon, everyone gathered at the usual spot in the condo's common area. Kate was there, laughing and mingling with her friends, acting like nothing in the world was wrong. We had the setup going as usual. Grills sizzling, beers being passed around, the four couples catching up. But this time, I was done playing along. It felt surreal standing there watching Kate talk to the group with this carefree, almost smug attitude. I knew what she'd been doing. I knew she was sitting there acting like everything was normal while she carried on with her lover behind my back. I don't know if it was the way she casually joked with the others or the memory of that recording still ringing in my head, but something just snapped. I decided right then and there that this was the moment to let the truth out. No more games. Kate was mid-sentence, laughing at something with her friends, and I took a deep breath, stepping forward to speak up. I kept it calm, careful. I just said, I think I've had about enough for one day. You ladies enjoy belittling us guys every weekend. Maybe it's time we all heard some of the real jokes around here. Silence hit the table like a hammer. The guys looked at me confused, but I saw the shift in the women's faces, especially Kate's. She looked at me with this frozen expression like she didn't know whether to laugh it off or be worried. The words started pouring out. I told them everything I'd figured out, how I'd watched Kate meeting with her perfect guy, Bob, how they'd slip off to the motel like it was some regular lunch date. The guys' jaws dropped, and the wives, well, they went from looking nervous to outright panicked. Kate tried to laugh it off, calling it paranoia and silly stories. She even shot back that I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I didn't back down. Then one of the other guys, G, turned to his wife, Emmy, and asked, "Is this true? Are you in on this too?" That's when things started unraveling fast. Emmy tried to deflect, but I had already hinted enough. G didn't need much to piece it all together. The more he pressed her, the redder she turned. She was out of excuses. That's when Marcy, Cecil's wife, looked away, clearly trying to avoid eye contact, and Cecil caught on that there was more to it than just Kate. The whole situation was like a bomb going off in slow motion. None of them could escape it. They knew I'd figured everything out. Kate looked furious, a mixture of embarrassment and anger flashing across her face, but I didn't care. I wasn't stopping. I made it clear to everyone there that I had the proof, the facts, that I'd followed her to the motel, that I'd heard what she'd been saying about me with her friends when I wasn't around. I even threw in a few choice details from that recording, just so she knew exactly what I had on her. By this point, the guys were looking at their wives like they were strangers. That's when Kate finally broke. She leaned forward, head in her hands, and threw up right there on the table. The food, the drinks, everything was ruined. Her friends quickly jumped up trying to help her, but the damage was done. I'd said what I came to say. Everyone was too shocked to respond. Emmy and Marcy helped Kate out of her seat, guiding her away from the table, but not before giving me a look like I was some kind of monster for airing it all out. I stood there watching them leave, feeling more relieved than I ever expected. This wasn't how I thought I'd spend my Saturday, but at least now everyone knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. After that day, everything started falling apart. The whole group was shaken up. For the first time, all the little jokes and hints about loyalty turned into full-blown accusations. Everyone was scrambling to make sense of it. No one wanted to believe it, but the truth was out there and we couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew Kate wasn't the only one in on this game they'd been playing, and it was only a matter of time before everyone else came face to face with the truth about their own wives. That night, I went home by myself. Kate stayed over at Emmy's place, and honestly, I preferred it that way. I spent hours just sitting in our empty apartment, thinking back on everything, trying to piece together what to do next. Every time I thought about Kate with Bob, it made my stomach twist. I couldn't look at her the same way, and I knew we were done. But I hadn't expected what happened next with the others. The next day, I got a call from G. He sounded different, more intense, like he was on the edge. He told me he couldn't get any answers out of Emmy, and so he'd gone to her gym and confronted the trainer she'd been spending time with. I don't know exactly what went down, but apparently it wasn't a calm conversation. G admitted he lost it and threw a punch, and the trainer didn't fare well. Things got bad enough that G ended up calling me from the police station. The guy needed my help to post bail. Then there was Cecil. Poor guy, looked like a ghost when I saw him next. He'd finally confronted Marcy, and she'd broken down, admitting she'd been seeing her boss on and off for months. Cecil wasn't the type to make a scene. He just shut down. He spent that entire night alone, drinking in his car outside our building instead of going home. Raymond, meanwhile, was calling me nonstop, needing details, needing to know if Jill was part of it too. When I told him what I'd heard, he fell completely silent. His wife had practically confessed in the recordings, and he just sat there processing it all. That whole weekend was chaos. None of us could escape it, not even at home. Kate tried to come back once, thinking we could talk things out, but I was done. I packed her things up, left them by the door, and told her that if she needed a place to stay, she could go to her parents' house. She looked stunned, even angry. But what could she say? There was no way to make any of this better. Not now. Each of us handled it in our own way. Raymond started digging into Jill's finances, finding receipts and credit card charges for gas stations and motels he'd never heard of. He was furious, and within days he'd packed up her stuff and sent it to her sisters. He wanted nothing more to do with her. Cecil, on the other hand, was so broken he took a week off work. He barely spoke to anyone and eventually just arranged to transfer out of state altogether. It was like he couldn't stand to be near the place anymore. I guess I expected some big dramatic scene from the wives, but mostly they just scattered. The friendship we all had, that was dead. The women barely looked at each other when they ran into one another in the hallways, and the men only talked when it was absolutely necessary. At the end of it all, that group and those weekends we'd spent together had just become one big joke, and I knew none of us would ever see those Saturdays the same way again. In the end, I came to terms with it all, but not without a mess in between. Kate moved out to stay with her parents, and we didn't speak much after that. Every time she came by to grab more of her things, she'd barely look at me. She tried to make small talk at first, acting like we could somehow get through this, but I wasn't interested. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. I didn't have the energy to pretend there was anything left to salvage. Raymond and G, they both went through their own hells. Raymond managed to dig up everything he could on Jill. Old text messages, hotel receipts, and even GPS history from the family car. It was like he was hunting for every last bit of proof, even though he already knew the truth. He couldn't let it go. Eventually, he filed for divorce and moved down to Miami for a fresh start. He'd always wanted to go there, and now he had the excuse to cut ties and start over. G's story was rougher. After he lost his temper with Emmy's gym trainer, he had charges to deal with, and Emmy filed a civil case for domestic abuse. It didn't matter that she was the one who'd been cheating, he had crossed a line, and he'd have to pay for it. I helped him as much as I could, got him through the legal process, but he ended up serving some time. He was a wreck. Eventually, though, he made peace with it, and when he got out, he actually took a job teaching welding at a vocational school. The guy needed something to keep him moving forward, and I guess that was it. Then there was Cecil. He didn't stick around long. Marcy's affair had shaken him so badly that he just packed up and arranged for a transfer. One day he was here. The next day he was off to some tiny island in the Pacific working at a postal office, far away from anything that reminded him of his old life. He avoided Marcy for weeks before he left, took his things out when she wasn't home, and didn't look back. I heard through the grapevine that Marcy had her own fallout. Someone, probably one of Cecil's friends, got back at her in a big way. She lost her job, and let's just say the tattoo she'd gotten for her lover didn't end well either. But Cecil didn't know, and he wouldn't care. He was done with all of it. As for me, I tried to keep things quiet. The more I stayed busy with work, the easier it was to move on. Kate and I eventually got divorced. No big showdown, just paperwork. She stayed with her parents, and last I heard, she wasn't doing much of anything. It was like she just faded out. Maybe she thought it would be different, less that she'd leave and be free to live this exciting life she thought she wanted. But it didn't turn out that way. Turns out the fantasy wasn't worth the fallout. We never went back to those Saturday barbecues, of course. After everything, the whole idea of it felt like some kind of joke. Once a week, we'd all sat around pretending we were these happy couples, talking sports and gossip, throwing back drinks, and acting like friends. But looking back, it was clear there had been a lot we weren't saying. Maybe that's how we ended up here in the first place, ignoring the signs, letting things slide, assuming we knew each other. Well, we didn't. In the end, I guess I learned a lot about people and about trust. Those weekends were supposed to be a time to unwind, a break from the grind, but in reality, they just masked all the issues we were too afraid to deal with. Now I don't miss those Saturdays. I don't miss pretending everything was perfect. I'd rather be alone than live in that lie ever again.